It's finally the time to buy Christmas decorations because I don't know what is going on in Germany. It's too early. It's too early. I want my Halloween. Halloween, Halloween. Moin, moin, dear people, old, new, my friends, the friends of my friends, my relatives, and anyone in the world who found this channel and who thought that the topics I'm talking about might be interesting for them. My name is Anna of Northern Germany, and I am reminding you that I am a survivor, a fighter, a writer, and on this channel I'm talking about writing, about books, about mental health awareness, and all this together. And every October, this is the second October of my channel, so let's say every October, I am having the season of the witch because it's very dear to me. I'm Russian and I have never had a chance to celebrate Halloween properly, and I cannot organize a costume party, unfortunately, because all my friends are scattered all over the world. But I grew up and now I can do whatever I want. Also, since I live in Germany now, and Germany is a bit more Halloween friendly, although, yeah, as I had already mentioned in the intro, well, I think starting with Christmas decorations in September is a bit too much. I don't know how popular Halloween is, but today I was in Teddy where I bought these, and I was actually hunting after a Halloween blanket, but in Kik they already have Christmas blankets, and in an auction where they are supposed to have blankets, like Halloween blankets, they're just simply not there because Christmas is everywhere. And then we complain that we don't have the Christmas mood. Yeah, so I turned myself into a witch today, and I am drinking this. This is the ginger tea because maybe you can hear it from my voice. I'm unfortunately not super well. Well, I'm well. I'm doing much better than I used to be doing like for the past month, but I have this feeling of cold, not exactly a cold, so I'm drinking my ginger tea, and there is eucalyptus oil burning here, and I'm also quite warm and happy, and I'm starting the season of the witch. And what I want to start the season of the witch with, I want to start it with the literature because I'm obsessed with literature. Unfortunately, I don't have many books with me. Well, I have Master and Margarita, and there was a video last year. But I wanted to speculate about the fact that this culture of witches seems to be quite vast in the English-speaking world and in other cultures too. Not that I know that many cultures. Witches in the literature in English, because I read mostly literature in English. In this literature, witches get a lot of representation, but in Russia it's not a thing somehow. And initially the idea was that I will be talking about the fact that witches are not represented in the Russian books or in the post-Soviet books. I don't know how to say it better. And why? And I've got some ideas why. But a bigger issue arose while I was doing the research because, well, there are books that contain witches. But there were books I explored. There were books that I forgot. Some of those books we even read at school, and those were very interesting books that are interesting even now and for school. And usually the literature lessons at school, they tend to be boring, they tend to be far from the real life, and kids simply don't enjoy. But there are stories that I personally really enjoyed, and but there is some issue. I will talk about this topic, and I will also present some stories about witches or with witches in them. And then I'll give you a bit of a break to realize if you also see the issue here, or maybe you don't. I don't know. And then I will tell you what the issue exactly is if you didn't figure it out. Sounds a bit weird. But okay, let's begin. So I started it as a research why Russian authors don't seem to be very keen on writing about witches. And I thought, well, maybe it happened that witches are not so very interesting in the Russian culture in comparison to the culture of the English culture, so to say. And I realized, no, not at all. Another suggestion that Google gives you, or ChatGPT that is now in Google, I'm not too happy about that, but what they suggest us believing in the fact that in Russia there were no witch trials. But if you watched my video from the last year, you know that there were witch trials. They were not such a mass event, but still there were witch trials, and they were not only about like female witches, but also about male witches. Men in Russia didn't even give us the privilege to be like witches bitches. It's very sad. Let's look into Russian witches, and I'm not going to talk about Baba Yaga, because also last year I said that Baba Yaga is not exactly a witch. It's a creature. It's a creature that guards this border between the life and death. So we'll not talk about her. We'll talk about the women, because I want to talk about the women who were considered witches in the Russian society. What is a Slavic witch? On the one hand, the Slavic witch is very respected, because in Russian the witch is called ведьма. It's from the word ведать, or to know. That means to know, ведать. And often somewhere in the rural areas during the period of serfdom, a witch who knew how to manage herbs and other stuff was in a very high value, because she was the only person who could treat these poor people's maladies. Because of course, rich people, they had their fancy doctors, and the villagers, they didn't have such a privilege. But of course, at the same time, witches were feared. They were feared because on the one hand, it was believed that they derived their powers from the nature, but also at the same time it was believed that they derived their powers from the devil. And it was believed that the witch, she could grant you a blessing, but also at the same time she can curse you. So these women, we'll talk about who these women exactly were. These women were known to have these powers. It was very kind of dangerous to argue with them, because maybe something bad would follow, either in the family of the person who insulted the witch, or in the whole village. This is quite massive. It's global. you know. In this case, yes, witches' trials were not that common, but at the same time, people were quite engaged into persecution. They could have picked a witch among the people, and how would you recognize a witch? Well, it's probably a poor woman, not even necessarily she was unmarried, you know, but that was a woman who didn't follow the rules of the society. And how did they know that she didn't follow the rules? Well, women of the village, they were very careful to watch after other women. If they noticed that there was light on for too long, hi to the night owls, they thought that the devil visits this woman. And of course, all the women who were either childless and without a husband, or women who married but against their family's decision, or who gave birth to a child, an illegitimate child. The question where the father was, men are clueless, are always. And these women were pushed out of the village because also there was an economic reason why they were pushed, because such women, lone women, they are the burden of the community. That's why it was very easy to just say, you're a witch, get out of here. At the same time, you must understand how it could happen that they cursed someone, these poor women. For example, in the village, there is an argument. Two women are arguing, and one woman says, go to hell, go to hell. And she is kind of known to be the witch. And, unfortunately, the child of the woman who offended the witch, who was arguing with the witch, dies, well, in a week, even in a month or something, because this is what children did at that point, because there was no vaccination, hi to anti-vaxxers. Again, if the only person who can treat your child is the woman who knows how to mend herbs, well, that was what kids did. They died. Or something else happened. Or the cow died, because the cow was very important. The cow provided the family with milk. If there is no cow, there is no milk, starvation. Where in the global picture, all crops died. All crops didn't survive because of after the thunderstorm. It might have happened like long after the argument happened, but of course, with their level of education, villagers thought that's exactly what happened. And how did they force these women to leave? They basically deprived them of food, so they didn't sell them salt, whatever it was, like bread and other stuff, and they also didn't share their food with them. And additionally, they didn't let them into their own houses, like the witch's house. The witch wasn't let in. I really don't want to imagine how it was taking place, but I will mention one novel. Maybe a picture will appear in your head after that. Also, these women were known not to pray before food, and whenever people prayed in those years, they also couldn't enter the church, because the belief was that, of course, if they entered the church, they all start smoking. I don't know what would happen. And in the reality, it wasn't that. It was just they were not welcome in the church. Of course, everybody would notice them in the church and they would be kicked out in a very unpleasant way, likely. Plus, according to villagers' beliefs, these women, because they sold their soul to the devil, of Of course, they cannot die peacefully. It takes a lot of time for them to die. They die in agony for many, many days, or sometimes the god just doesn't want to take their soul, so they live for a very, very long time, because of course, in this case, death is seen as the relief. And I also have a similar story in my family. Well, it's not exactly my family. I have, like, how to say it? Well, my great-grandpa had an illegitimate daughter, and that daughter had a husband, and the husband had the family, and the family was a bit bizarre, and there was a lady in this family who was known to be a witch, and she had to kill herself to jump out of the window because she couldn't die otherwise. Scary. Another suggestion for you to die more easily: to give your powers to another person. And I'm not even sure it's like a Russian belief. Maybe it's already mixed with all other beliefs, because it's of course more modern. And now tell me, are witches boring? Are Slavic witches boring? Because no, that was just, you know, a random question from my head. Maybe, yeah, of course, there are witches abroad are mysterious, but our witches are boring. No, not at all. I think you could have speculated about this endlessly, literally endlessly. But my belief why it didn't happen generally, because of course it was a villager's thing to believe in this folklore stuff, because the noble society, they were completely different. If you are aware of the War and Peace, if you saw this very incredibly uselessly thick book, The War and Peace, and if you put your hand on it sometime, if you try to read it, you know that the first pages are in French, and there is the logic behind it, because the noble spoke French with each other. They couldn't care less for fairy tales, for folklore, etc., etc. But the villagers did care. They told fairy tales, they told stories. And also one of the authors, Alexander Pushkin, who I'm going to mention, he was quite interested in folklore, and he was famous for retelling various fairy tales because he had a nanny from peasants. And she, of course, shared her ideas with him. She shared her views, her world picture with him. That's why he got fascinated about it. But okay, we figured that the stories are not many. It's strange, but there is kind of a reason for that. But at the same time, there are some stories, and I will share with you some stories. Some of them I read personally. One story I listened to very recently because I was very curious about the story. Some of them I read some time ago. Some of them I read at school. Some of them I didn't read because I believe that they don't present too much of interest for me, but maybe sometime in the future I'll still read or listen to them, because likely I will listen, because it's very hard to find like a printed book in Russian. But let's look at these stories, and I want to start with the one that impressed me a lot, and I finished listening to it very recently on the bus to work. And the story is called Olesya by Kuprin. When I was at school, we read stories written by this author, Kuprin, his name Alexander, yes, Alexander Kuprin. But I wasn't too into him. He didn't seem interesting for me, a bit boring, because of course the Russian literature, Russian authors, they tend to write about the doomed life, doomed love, and some authors, in my opinion, they succeed in that. And some authors, well, they also succeed in that, but they're just not my favorite authors. So yeah, I read them at school because I had to, but I never returned to them when I grew up. And this is the author and the story we didn't read at school. And actually it's very sad. It's very sad that we didn't read this story. The story is about a man, his name is Ivan, but it doesn't matter much. He lives in some kind of a village. He is, of course, from noble people, and he has some work to do in this village. And it also doesn't matter what kind of work he has to do, because it's not about that. And he is friends with one of the villagers, and suddenly he becomes interested, he becomes very into this topic of witches, and he asks his villager friend, are there witches in the village? And the friend of his, who then stopped being friends with him because he got engaged into the love affair with a witch, this noble person. And this friend says, yes, there are some, but I really, really, really don't recommend you to go there and question them and ask around about them, sniff around. It's very bad. It's very bad. The God will punish you. Of course, otherwise, if he said, nah, okay, there would be no plot. But he decided to go there. He meets an old lady there, and of course, a very beautiful woman who is a villager. Of course, she's young, beautiful, illiterate, but very smart, almost wise, but also very superstitious. And he mocks her for being so superstitious, for believing in her thingies, in her powers, and also believing in this devil and God thing. At the same time, he believes that for him as a man, as a noble man, it's fine not to believe in God, or it's fine to believe in God but not to go to the church. But from her, he would expect her to go to church. He would see that as a good thing. He would see it as a love sign. So at some point when he has to leave the village because his job is over, he suggests her that, will you marry me? And she says, of course, no. Of course, no. She says, no, I will never marry you. I'm very sorry. And he asks her if this is all about the church again. And she questions him, well, if I went to the church, would it please you? And he has this strange feeling, but he also laughs at himself, like, yeah, look at yourself, you're also superstitious. But he has this feeling that maybe she shouldn't go to the church. And it ends with her going to the church, standing barely at the entrance. And of course, everybody notices her. And it also the day when people expect to have bad omens connected with the crops for the whole season. I'm not sure what this day is called. I'm not really into these religious celebrations. She barely stands there, and then they gather, like the whole crowd. They start attacking her. They rip the clothes on her. They hurt her. They almost want to murder her. And of course, she slips out of the situation, and she pronounces the curse that you are all going to weep. And she disappears. And yeah, she's very injured, and she says goodbye to her love, because she knows that she was going to leave very soon, because if something happens in the village, they would accuse her and her grandma. That's an interesting story to read. I highly recommend it if you can find it in English or in whatever language you are, whatever language is your native. But what are other stories about witches, Russian stories? I have already mentioned Bulgakov, Master and Margarita. Actually, I even have writing routine of Bulgakov, if you want to watch that. And also Bulgakov was known to be this mysterious author, the author of the mystique. And maybe if you feel like it, if you feel like dipping deeper into the Russian literature, and if you want something Halloweeny, maybe give it a try to Bulgakov. And another story by Alexander Pushkin. And this one probably stands out because, yeah, well, Pushkin was a bastard, but very, very talented bastard, as many other Russian authors. And I think the story stands out, but I cannot quite grasp in what way. But the story is about the Queen of Spades. The Queen of Spades is like Bloody Mary. It's something creepy that you can summon with your friends at a party if you really want to. But this story is about a person, a man of course, who doesn't play cards originally, but he's craving this, you know. He wants to try to play cards, but he of course wants to win. And finds out that the grandma of his friend, she has some kind of a secret that would help him to win the card games, or one card game. And he goes to this grandma, he threatens her, she dies, poor thing, poor old thing. And she comes to him in his dream and she shares the secret. Why? You'll find out why. I understand why. I understand what the difference with the other stories is. It just came to my mind. So he starts playing and it doesn't go great, of course. He loses money. And there is this one final game, I hope I remember it correctly, and in this game he has this feeling that he's going to win because he knows the secret, and he gets these cards, and the cards, they follow according to the secret, how it was shared. But then some magic happens, and actually the last card was completely different and he loses everything. And what the difference is from other stories is that the woman took it. The woman took it from him. She took her revenge. Wow. Highly recommended. Alexander Pushkin, The Queen of Spades. What I also mentioned last year, Nikolai Gogol. Well, he's Ukrainian, he worked in Russia, so please don't hate me for mentioning Nikolai Gogol, because I really don't know if he's a Ukrainian author. I don't know who he considered himself. He also worked in Russia a lot. I also studied Gogol at school. A lot of his stories, actually. Some of his stories are insane. For example, the nose, if you leave these kind of stuff and the candle has died. Or you can watch, or you can read V. It's crazy. Also, it's about the wronged woman, kind of, who also took her revenge in the end. Also a fun story. Another one is a bit different because there is no witch whatsoever. It's called The Witch. It's by Anton Chekhov. Chekhov. In Russian it would be Chekhov. And recently I found out he was also a sexist, a bastard, and he also overcomplicated lives of all the women around him, especially of his sister and his mother. And he took them for granted. So, and generally, I'm not a short story lover, and I don't like Chekhov, except for the Cherry Garden, probably, and the Seagull, because they're plays, and I really like theater plays of his. But in this story, it's called The Witch, but it's basically of this church priest wife, and there is a blizzard, and the main idea of the story that her husband, this priest, is complaining throughout the whole story that she is the witch. Why? Because she cursed like the house around and the blizzard happened. That's pretty much it. Maybe this one doesn't sound too interesting. I'm sure it isn't. But I found it, I discovered this story while doing the research, so it also exists. And another one, it's not the last because there are more, but the authors are not that famous. And this author, he is also not famous. His name is Valery Briussov. I think I know the surname as a painter rather, but I think it's definitely a different person. And he wrote the story based on the European tradition. Like on the German tradition, there is the witch who sold her soul, and he's in love with her, but she's also seeking this fiery angel, and the novel is called The Fiery Angel. She used to live with some lord, and she saw the fiery angel when she was little. It's basically the Phantom of the Opera, kind of, but a bit more wild. And she's seeking this fiery angel, and the soldier who meets her, he falls in love, and she persuades him to kill this lord with whom she used to live, and all mess, and then she sees the fire angel again, and now she thinks that it's an angel, and she believes that now she must stop her witchy deeds, and this is how she ends up being a nun. But our soldier, he becomes a part of some kind of religious commission, and they together travel to a monastery, and in the monastery there is some woman who is, of course, this lady, this witch, and they cannot quite decide by themselves if this woman is a witch or if she is a holy person. So they have to kill her. And the soldier, he wants to save her, but she refuses, and she dies, and she believes that she paid for all her sins, and now she is going to see the God. Yeah, this one is wild. Actually, it's based on the real story, but not the real story. It was based on the real love life of the author, on the woman who he was in love with. Of course, it was completely different, but his imagination, his wild imagination, gave birth to this, and also he was inspired by the European tradition. Yeah, so those are the stories. Now, what do you think it is? What do they have in common? What's the problem here? Do you have your guesses? Well, what I see the problem. What is the problem here? I recently found out when I started filming the writing routines, I found out that Russian literature is so extremely sexist. And while in other traditions we still have female authors, somehow in the Russian tradition, especially up till the early 20th century or the end of the 19th century. It was so male dominant, and here you can see there is no book written from the witch perspective. It's all written from the man's perspective. There's always a church worker, a soldier, or a retired soldier, or a noble person, or whoever this person is. So the main character, or at least, or the narrator is male, and it's very obvious of the story. And I really struggled to remember the stories or novels of classical Russian literature written from a female POV. And I see a big problem here. It's not something that you can change, unfortunately, but it's something to be aware of. And I really hope, I have hopes in the modern Russian literature, in female written Russian literature, but oh my God, oh my God. Let's close the channel, let's close everything, let's close this notebook. I'm finished, the season of the witch is finished. By not even being started. I'm very curious to know, especially if you're not originally from an English-speaking country, how vast is the representation of witches in your culture, because of course there are so many interesting things, like so many folklore tales and folklore traditions in many other countries, like in South America or in any African country. I'm pretty sure, like in Asia and anywhere, they have their own traditions. And also how men dominated this area is, I'm very curious to know. So if you feel like sharing, that would be very nice. Otherwise, Olesya by Alexander Kuprin is very recommended, and the Queen of Spades, you can find it. Also, Master and Margarita, why not? It's the perfect season for them. Fiery Angel, maybe you want to give it a try, I don't know. Nikolai Gogol, excellent. I'm glad that I managed to scrape together a bit of book recommendations if you are into this topic of this Halloween, but make it Slavic, as I named the video last year. Yeah, so I think this is pretty much it. I will be finishing. I am a bit overexcited because I got a call that I'm getting a job, and the job is much better than I had expected. Wow! And also it's fall, and I hope this automatic curtain is going to lift, because this one is broken, the one behind me, and I really hope that the other two are still capable of being lifted. And stay with me for the season of the witch, stay with me for longer if you want to. Maybe the quality of my videos is not top, but I definitely enjoy what I'm doing here, and I'm not too annoying to listen to. At least this is what I want to believe in. I will be wishing you from my chilly autumn northern Germany love and peace, and my witchy choose to you.